Hello, everyone. I'm Luca. I work as a senior full-stack software engineer at Beefree, where we try to develop a highly customizable SDK without sacrificing ease of implementation. Have you ever tried to do that? It's really hard, I can tell you. Why is it hard? Because you have to strike the right balance between giving your customer the right amount of customization option while keeping the implementation of the SDK easy without requiring too much effort on their side. I'm going to briefly go over the agenda. I'll start by defining what it means to make an SDK customizable and telling you about some of the key challenges that you'll face when trying to do so. Then I'll give you a brief overview of the customization tools we offer at Beefree, just to give you an example of what customization means and maybe give you some ideas for your products. Then I'll go over the lessons we learned while developing our SDK. These lessons are two-way communication, striking the right balance, starting small and iterating, early customer collaboration, and the documentation is also a feature. Then I'll do a deep dive into the development of the custom LLM add-on feature to show you how these lessons are not just theory, but can be applied to a real-world scenario. To start, what can you do to make your SDK customizable? Well, you can imagine two options. The first one is to give little to no customization, limit the possibilities that the developers have by simplifying a lot the integration of your SDK into the host application. This, though, is not flexible enough and for sure not adaptable to huge and complex use cases. Another option is you can try and guess every possible scenario, every possible use case that your user might have, but even this way, you'll probably lose some edge cases because there's no one solution to rule them all. So what we did at Beefree was try to strike the right balance. Give our customer enough customization options while still ensuring a smooth integration of our SDK into the host application. One way we do this is by leaving the SDK simple and providing our customer with the add-on interface. This add-on interface has two aspects: the partner add-ons that we develop or some of our customers develop, and then after we approve them, were made available on our marketplace. And this can allow our customer to extend the basic functionalities of the SDK with features we don't provide out of the box inside to the SDK, but that you can activate through our SDK console. This is a powerful tool, but an even more powerful version is the custom add-ons. The custom add-ons are basically the same thing as the partner add-ons, but completely developed by our customer that have full control on the logic that resides inside the add-on and even the UX and the UI of the add-on that can fit their needs as best as they can. While developing a custom add-on, we give two options to our customers. They can either go with the iFrame, something a lot of you might be familiar with, that it's great for hosting complex application, pre-existing application. It lives inside the SDK, but it's not deeply integrated with it, and it interacts with the SDK through JavaScript API. Or you can use something we developed, the Content Dialog. This is a layer of interaction between the SDK and the host application that allows the two-way communication we spoke about briefly before. This Content Dialog can give our customer full control over the UI while offering a seamless experience because compared to the iFrame, it's much more well integrated inside the SDK. The setup to use the Content Dialog is simple. You need to specify the Content Dialog object inside the bconfig object. The bconfig object is simply a JSON that allows our customer to set up the settings of the SDK while integrating it in their host application. The core of this is the handler function, where all the custom logic and even the custom UI resides. The handler function has a simple restriction. It must either resolve to a valid value responding to an interface we provide, or reject if the interaction is cancelled by the user, to allow the builder activity to resume seamlessly. Another important tool you can use to enable customization inside your SDK are the callbacks. These allow your customer to react dynamically to events that take place inside the SDK, such as user interaction or system events. In response to these events, they can trigger custom logic to customize the experience for their end user to their needs. An example of a callback we provide inside our SDK is the unchanged callback that allows our customers to react to any changes made to the template by the user. For example, by updating the version of the template they saved on their DB. But customization is only the beginning. As I told you before, you cannot customize to the full extent without sacrificing a little the ease of implementation. So you need to strike the right balance, make the tool flexible enough to respond to your customer need, while keeping it intuitive, giving control to their developers, while also giving them the chance to implement it into their host application in a little time. While doing this, we faced many challenges, but through those challenges, we learned some important lessons. The first one is that two-way communication is essential to make an SDK highly customizable. That's because it's hard to have customization if there's no way for the SDK to communicate with the host application and vice versa. An example of this in the features we just talked about are the callback triggers and the Content Dialog interface. Considering your projects, I want you to think if there's any point where you can introduce better two-way communication. Another lessons we learned, something that I already anticipated a little, is that you need to strike the right balance between customization and simplicity. This sometimes boils down to choosing if you need to provide a tool ready to use out of the box or a fully customizable tool. The difference is that tools ready to use out of the box are really nice for developers because they can implement it in minutes if they're fine with the default configurations, but require more effort on your side as an SDK provider because you need to develop the feature basically all the way. We've got the fully customizable tools. Instead, you shift the development effort to your customer. This gives them greater flexibility. They can do whatever they want with the feature, basically, provided that you work really well on the architecture, because the architecture this time becomes the product, and they need a good architecture. You need to lay the foundation for them to build good features. In regards to your product, I want you to consider if there are areas that might be too complicated right now, and if you could add value for your customer by simplifying them. Another important lesson is to start small and iterate. Don't go all out from the get-go. Don't try to build the perfect product, thinking of everything that your customer might need from the start. Simply build an MVP, a minimum viable product, with the minimum feature your customer need to gain value from your product. Then listen to them. Listen to their feedback. Ask for their feedback. Based on that feedback, iterate. Change your MVP. Add new feature. Modify the existing one that will work for them. And then, when you get to the right point, scale and deliver the product your customer actually want. In regard to your product, something that I'd like you to do with your next feature is to think what's the minimum set of features you need to deliver to your customer to give them value quickly. Something that goes hand in hand with the previous lesson is that you need to collaborate with your customer early. The sooner you do it, the better it is for you. Why? Because it allows you to focus on what really matters for them. You won't waste development effort on features that they might not find that useful, but you could consider useful. And most importantly, you will work based on real-world needs, real-world consideration for your customer, and not just internal assumption that no matter how you are knowledgeable about your area, might still be wrong. Introducing collaboration from your customer early on basically allow you to expand the cycle we saw in the previous slide by having your customer feedback even from the planning stage. And this allows you to have the prototype, that's basically the MVP we spoke about before, that's almost already what your customer needs. Thinking of your products, is there any feature you delivered in the last month, year, where having had customer collaboration, customer feedback earlier in the process would have helped you deliver better value? Can you think of a next feature that you're going to release where you could benefit from involving customers early? Last but not the least, don't forget the documentation is a feature. You might build the best SDK, the most customizable SDK, but it will still be useless if your customer don't have the right documentation to understand how to use it and how it works. At Beefree, we go by the us first principle. Be your first customer. A way you can apply that to documentation is once your feature is ready and you have the documentation for that feature, have someone from your team, ideally that doesn't work on that specific feature, try to implement or try to use that feature by going off of the documentation alone. If you can do it, your documentation is solid, you're good to go. If you cannot, that's great, because you spotted a huge error before your customer did. This will save you headaches, support tickets, lost adoption, and a lot of frustration on your customers' developers that, due to that frustration, might even migrate to one of your competitors. So, thinking about your product, if you go home now, can you implement one of your important features going only off of the documentation without asking for internal help? As I told you before, all these lessons are not just theory. They are derived from our experience and can apply to specific real-world cases. The one I'm going to talk to you about is the implementation of the custom LLM add-on. But before doing that, a little bit of background. As you know, we are in the midst of an AI race where everyone is striving to use the best model, introduce AI feature in their product, sometimes even if they don't know if that's actually useful for the users or if the user really want it, just to keep up with the trend and be part of the cool kids. What we did at Beefree was evaluate the needs of our customer and introduce a range of AI features, starting with the AI writing assistant, then going to the AI generated alt text, image generation, and bot translation to aid our customer in their daily work and speed up the generation of the template. Even though this tool was highly requested and we saw good adoption, we saw little to no adoption for the enterprise customers. And this led us to ask some questions. Why weren't they using it? It's simple. They needed more control. They had strict policies on privacy and how their data were used. And they weren't fine with the fact that the feature we developed used commercially available models such as ChatGPT or OpenAI or Stable Diffusion, because it's not always clear how those models handle your data. So we need to find a way to deliver the custom LLM feature to our customer. Why did we go with the custom LLM add-on? Because we went through the tools at our disposal in order to see if we already had something they could use to introduce their custom LLM inside the SDK. And at first, the custom add-on seems like a good solution because it could allow for AI customization inside the SDK, and it was basically up to them to decide what to do with a custom add-on. But this meant for them, they needed to duplicate all the tiles, the modules we use inside our builder, where they wanted to use AI-powered features. This, of course, required a high development effort on their side, and at the same time delivered a poor experience for the end user, making it inconsistent when they were with huge difference when they were using our AI provided features versus the custom LLM features. So what we decided to do, create a partner add-on specifically made by us to implement custom LLMs inside the SDK. This allowed for seamless integration inside the builder, the reusage of the same entry point we had for our AI writing assistant, keeping the user experience consistent. While doing this, we used the lessons we learned from previous implementation to drive the result home. The first lesson we considered was two-way communication. We needed a way to establish communication between the SDK and the custom LLM of our customers. How we decided to do it? With the Content Dialog interface I talked to you before. We knew this solution was reliable, could scale well, and was adaptable enough to change in response to the changing needs for our customer. What we needed to get right, though, was the interface, because compared to our AI writing assistant, the Content Dialog interface is not that deeply integrated with the SDK. All the data it can access are those that we give in input to the Content Dialog. And at first, we thought we knew what our customer needed, but going by the second lessons, early customer collaboration, we soon discovered that it wasn't the case. We thought all they needed to use their custom LLM was the content of the module they were working on. But after confronting with some of our customers, we discovered that they also needed the module UID and the module type to get better results. Why we didn't consider those two? Because with our AI writing assistant that's deeply integrated into the SDK, those information are easily accessible. Early customer collaboration also helped us in making the biggest design decision we had for this feature. We had to decide whether to provide a pre-built UI to our customer, or if we wanted to let them develop their custom-made UI from scratches. We were going with option one. Why? Because we thought they already have to implement the backend. We can meet them halfway by providing a UI that mimics our writing assistant, where they can simply attach their backend. But after confrontation with our customer, we discovered that they didn't care for our UI because they wanted to make their own UI, to make a seamless experience inside their host application. So we dropped the pre-built UI and basically got a win-win because there was less development effort on our side, effort that would have gone to waste either way, and the customer still got to keep the flexibility they desired. How we managed to do all of this is by keeping in mind the documentation is a feature, because even if we had developed an MVP, if we didn't write documentation for the MVP, basically writing a first draft right after the MVP was ready, our customer would have had no way of knowing how to use the feature, how to understand how it works. By giving our customer the documentation for the MVP as soon as it was ready, they were able to help us in defining the interface, as I told you before, and understanding that they didn't need the pre-built UI. One thing we wanted to do, but we fell short here, was have some of our customers develop a POC while we were still developing the MVP. But unfortunately, even though we involved them early in the development process, it was still too late because they needed time to allocate resources to this kind of test. They couldn't do it in the time we had at our disposal to develop the feature. The last lessons that we applied to this development was to start small and iterate. In this case, this meant building the minimum viable interface for the content dialog with the feedback we got from our customers and focus only on the AI writing assistant, even though we provide other AI features. This was meant to avoid over-investing upfront. Now that we have delivered this feature to our customer, we can wait for the feedback, see what they tell us about the feature, see if they actually adopt it. If they do, well, we have a solid foundation, solid reasons to go ahead and extend the customer LLM integration to all the other AI features we provide. If they don't, well, we won't have wasted development effort on features they don't use. So, as you saw, these lessons are not just theory. They can apply to real-world scenario and help you shape your design decisions and the way you deliver the feature to your customer. I'd like to briefly go over them once more before closing this talk. The first lesson is that two-way communication is essential for customization because you need to install a channel of communication between your SDK and the application that's integrating it. Second lesson, involve your customers early. This will help you avoid wasted effort and deliver the product your customer needs earlier than it would without involving them. You need to strike the right balance between flexibility and simplicity. Know when to use a ready-to-use tool out of the box and when to give your customer the full customization option, knowing that it will require more effort on their side. Fourth lesson, documentation is a feature. Remember, if you build the best SDK but don't have good documentation to go with it, your customer wouldn't know how to make the most out of your tool. They might use it, maybe 10% of the value they might get, or they might even get frustrated and abandon it altogether. Last, start small, iterate, and scale. This is another way you can avoid wasting development effort. By launching an MVP early on, gather real feedback from your customer, and based on that, expand strategically, or building upon what you already did, or reworking what you did, if that doesn't suit your customer. I'd like you to think, after this talk, if these lessons apply in any shape or form to your SDKs, and the challenges you faced while creating your SDK, or the SDK you are thinking of creating, while trying to make it flexible, but keeping it simple to integrate.